Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, you don't have to always follow the rules with Phil Jackman. We talk about creating a different approach to management, how you should trust people and allow them to do what they're good at, and how people doing things the same way they've always done them keeps Phil in employment.
Phil is a guerrilla worker, strategic thinker, occasional maverick, and reluctant overachiever, with an interest in culture change, creative opportunities, and regional development. He is the director of Guerrilla Working Limited, a consultancy working at the point where technology meets the organisation's people. Phil is a director of Dynamo Northeast, an industry-led initiative focusing on growing the tech sector in the Northeast, where he leads on the CyberNorth cyber cluster, including the delivery of Cyberfest. Phil is also director of Northeast Initiative on Business Ethics, working to make the Northeast the most ethical place to do business. So thank you ever so much, Phil, for joining us, and a big thanks to Mike for nudging you in our direction. Mike Coburn,
Yes.
Love you, dude. So we always ask our podcast guests, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, hello. And I suppose it depends how far back you want to go. When I was at school, I toyed with the notion of becoming a vet and did all the A-levels that were needed. Got a place at Heriot Watt to go and study. Didn't get the grades that I needed and went back to school actually to try and sit an entrance exam for Cambridge. Look at me. And just after a while, I just gave up and thought, no, that's not actually for me, and drifted off to do something else. And to be honest, though, I'm really glad that I didn't end up being that.
So what did you do instead then?
I drifted through university when a friend of mine said, there's plenty of places doing zoology at Newcastle. Perhaps that should have been a red flag, a warning anyway, a red flag. And so I went and did zoology for 3 years and didn't really get that much out of that. I think I got a degree in snooker more than anything else, and ended up with a rather poor degree. Went from there into the motor industry. I saw a small job advert in the Evening Chronicle for a trainee manager or management trainee. I can't remember what it is, with a company called Brown Brothers on Railway Street. And I went there and I loved it. They were distributors of parts and paint and all the bits that you need for a car for the automotive aftermarket. I fell in love with logistics, and that's kind of where I set off in my career.
Okay, so moving things about the Northeast and the rest of the country.
Yes, I started in the Northeast. I ended up in Oxford as a salesman, selling parts and paint to the automotive aftermarket in sunny and rural Oxfordshire, which was fascinating. Really a part of my career that I think I learned a lot of my craft about how to talk to people, how to communicate with them, how to break down barriers. It was a fascinating part of my career. I then went on to run a depot at High Wycombe and Gala Shields at the opposite end of the country, Edinburgh, and then I decided to go and do something different.
Okay.
There was an element of sales there. You're being trained into, so you've obviously had to look after people in that process as well. Is there anything within those roles that most appealed to you? Is it obviously connecting with people, but was management something for you?
Well, I started out as a management trainee, and the intention was that I'd always go into management through this program. And yes, so management, I think my second role when I opened the depot at High Wycombe, that was my first taste of management. I had 3 people to manage, and which was fascinating, especially one day when one was off, one was sick, and one was out, and I ended up by myself. But there you go, that's life. I've got a passion for management. I've got I think, a different approach to the way that people are managed, and it's been something that I've tried to work on and craft over the many years that I've been in management. So I've had 3 people to manage. I've had 1,400 people to manage, and I've tried to have a similar approach throughout.
So you said you did something else. What was next after the automotive industry?
Well, I stayed in the automotive industry. I thought that I'd got to the point within Brown Brothers where I wasn't interested in the next job. It meant going down to live in Swindon and being a bit like The Office, I just didn't fancy that. And so I thought I would go and be a dealer principal, somebody at the head of a car dealership.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and got a job at the Foreshore, who have now gone, as a parts marketing manager. And I thought I could work up my way through there, and that just didn't work. That was rubbish at it, and I ended up getting made redundant. So it lasted about it. But that was a fantastic thing for me, because it realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I went from there back into logistics in a company called Spices, an office products distributor,
Mm-hmm.
or were. They've gone this year, as many great companies go.
Mm-hmm.
It was fantastic. I just felt like I'd gone home. I ended up managing a 10,000 square meter depot of office products, Stabilo highlighters, pens, paper, all those exciting things that you'd find in the stationery.
Post-its.
Exactly, yes. Or repositional notes, as we've become to know them. And so I had a team of 30, 35, and it was just building that business, selling the services. And so all my sales background came in, all my management came in, and it was a fantastic period. And from then I went on to be IT director of Spices. So that's a strange story, because they were looking at a project to replace the ERP system, the economic resource planning system. They needed a token user. I was the only one outside of the IT department who had an email account. It was a CompuServe account, so I got chosen as the token user on the program. And as that went, as people fell by the way, I eventually ended up as IT director implementing this new system right across Europe. So it was a fantastic opportunity, and there's many stories in that journey. I think it's very interesting.
It's not a natural kind of progression for sales into IT, is it?
No, I have no IT qualifications. Actually, I tell a lie. I did a networking course once, so I think I got a certificate somewhere. But my skill set isn't in technology. I think the skill set that I have is the interface between non-technical people and technical people. I can talk both languages. I can enthuse about the need for technology and what you need to think about in terms of your technical implementation. I can devise strategy, and I can go back and enthuse the technical people how to deliver that. There's that old story about, you'll go and ask the IT people for something, and they deliver exactly what you asked for. And they say, but this doesn't work. You said, yes, but that's what you asked for. And it's that kind of interface where I provided that. That's my skill set, I think. Yeah.
Well, it is much needed, because sometimes you think you're talking at 6s and 7s, and you need that person to be able to sort of translate in sort of layman's terms what is needed.
Indeed, because IT is a people industry. You think of it as a technology industry, but it's all about using technology to improve people's lives, to make things easier, faster, better.
Yeah, we did a human-computer interaction at university with my masters. And
is that called a keyboard?
It's sort of making systems like easier for humans, because they don't just exist, do they? They have to be usable.
No, and there's this huge myth still around computing. I think we're getting out of it to a certain extent, though, that it's a technical thing. Cybersecurity is still stuck in that. The C-suite are still afraid to talk about cybersecurity because they don't want to be shown up. It's something that the IT team do. But yet we come home and we use our 15 devices all at once. And so technology, you don't need to think about the technology in technology, just like you don't need to think about how your car works when you drive in, and off you go. Yeah,
as long as it works.
Indeed. Yes. It's a nightmare when it doesn't, of course.
Yes.
But you can always switch it off and on.
Oh, wait a minute. Yes.
Well, I've given all the secrets away now.
Yes.
There you go.
I remember our Skybox wasn't working once. So I phoned up to get some help, and they were like, "We're going to perform a maneuver." I was like, "Ooh, a maneuver! This is exciting." And he's like, "Unplug everything, switch it off, switch it on. Does that work?" And like, yes. So is it every time before we have to phone up IT or Sky or whatever? It's like, perform the maneuver first.
I had a friend who worked for IBM, and I don't know whether this is a true story or not, but he told me that they employed people when they picked the phone up, and said, "Could you just check that it's switched on?" Because people used to say, "IT's not working. Can you just check that it's switched on?"
Oh, yeah.
And when I was at Spices, we used to have every so often, every night at 4:00, a depot would go offline. It's Manchester depot would go offline, and couldn't find anything wrong with the IT. And it turned out that at that point, the cleaner came in and she unplugged the switch to put a vacuum cleaner in. So there you go. There you go.
Yes, I like the it's like picnic error, problem in chair, not in computer, and ID10T error as well. Idiot.
I always say it's the nut behind the wheel, which I think goes back to my motor trade. Yeah, days.
Oh dear me.
You mentioned earlier about within management, the skills you've developed there. What do you think makes a difference in managing people, getting people working together, having that interface between technology and humans? What would you say stands out?
So I'm going to answer that question by saying that I think we think about management wrong, incorrectly. We think about management in terms of control, in terms of getting people to do things, in terms of checking up, monitoring, all those kind of things, which are very, very negative things. And I've asked this question of hundreds of people, and nobody ever comes into work to be controlled or checked or monitored. And so my approach has been to turn that on its head, trust people, allow them to do what they're good at in a way that they can, within a framework of what it is that we're trying to do. So the key role, I think, of management is to explain the purpose of the organization, what their role is in achieving that objective, and giving people the freedom and the space to get on and do that. So it's about developing relationships. It's about understanding what people are good at. It's about putting the right people in the right pegs. It's about encouraging people to have new experiences, to get involved in new things, to develop themselves. Yeah. We have a number of jobs that we come into when we've got the task that we're paid to do. We've got being part of that team to grow and share that responsibility. And we've got that bit of personal development that we need to do. And that's the bit that people leave out completely. So something I did really interesting earlier at Durham County Council when I was there, we followed this freedom mantra, freedom from hierarchy, freedom from location, and freedom from dogma. And we gave everybody half a day a week to go and do whatever they wanted. It had to be loosely work related, so they couldn't do underwater basket weaving, but they could go and attend a course, they could go and do some reading, they could go and take a computer to bits, they could go and do whatever they wanted. They just had to discuss it with their supervisor and go and do it. And about half the people really took to that. The other half kind of struggled. So the role of management was very much about helping those who struggled with this kind of way of thinking, rather than trying to control them.
No, I wish more people in organisations were like you, because those micromanagers, crikey, it's hard, isn't it?
It is. But if you think about it, the way that technology is going, if your job is to do A plus B and get C, a machine can do that. If you can describe it so a machine can do it, that job's going to go. A machine is going to do that. And all that will be left for humanity is creativity. So it's that spark that you need to focus on. How do you get people to be creative, to think differently about the way that they're approaching their job, how to make improvements in the way that they're doing, how to engage better with people.
It was Drew Rowland's podcast that he was talking about sort of creative levels at when you're 5 years old versus getting to an adult. You've got most kids at 5 have creative genius levels, and by the time we get to adults, it's something like, is it 2%? So he's trying to work with organizations to bring back creativity as a way of problem solving and getting people thinking a bit differently and looking at their roles and processes in different ways to progress the business, I suppose, isn't it? But we need.
Well, here comes my granddaughter's story, I'm afraid. So when I go and see her, we'll lie on the floor and we'll play with the bricks, and we'll pretend to be something. And yeah. So the other day we're playing a great game where I knocked on the door and pretended to be a postman, and she opened it and said hello, and there was absolutely no need for any props or anything. It's just in our own minds we were doing this, and I think that's the creative human spirit. So I try to blog. I blog 3 times a week. That's my creative outlet. Some of them are good, some of them are rubbish, but that's.
I say I'm blogging better out than in. Yes.
People read them, so that's fine.
No, that's great. So you mentioned you left Spicer and went to work in local government.
I did. So once again, I'd got to the point where I felt that the next step within Spice either didn't exist or wasn't for me. I mean, I was driving 60,000 miles a year, and I was in the plane going all sorts of places, and it just, the career next job just wasn't for me. So I thought, look, I wanted to actually go and do something, giving something back. And I think I'd reached that time of life. And so I looked for a job in the public sector back up in the Northeast region, and I saw this job as a senior IT manager at North Tyneside Council. Somehow landed that job. Great. And then I had a fantastic time at North Tyneside. We ended up moving into the new building in Cobalt. So one of my first jobs, I think, was to the IT department was scattered right across the borough, and we brought them all together at the is it the MEMA building opposite the Royal Quays? That building with the curved roof. We ended up as a single team in there. So again, the issues weren't about technology; they were about people management, bringing those teams together, bringing those different sets of experiences, histories, cultures together. That was the more important thing. And then we moved that from including the new data center to Cobalt. So lots of technology, lots of things we did. Lots of strategic direction, but the technology I left to the technologists, and my job was really the strategy and cajoling and encouraging the team.
That's brilliant.
Did you find there were any differences between private sector and public sector in terms of how you get projects done or the people involved?
Yes, definitely. But then there were very many similarities. So I'm going to start with the similarities first, and that is that people worked very hard. People were absolutely committed to what it was they were doing. In fact, I think the senior management in the public sector worked as hard, if not harder, than anybody I've ever seen. I think the differences were predominantly is the commitment to public good in the public sector. People go there to do good for the public, and that runs right through. If you snap them in half, it's written inside them. It's on their pajamas, you know what I mean? And the second one, I think, is some of the constraints due to the political, but also public money issues. You know, people say, oh, the things take an enormous amount of time in public sector. And yes, they do. And that's good, because it's your money they're spending, and, you know, it's your lives that they're affecting. So you don't want to make rash decisions. And I could stray into politics at the moment, but I think I'll leave that if you don't mind.
Sideswipe that one.
So there are many similarities, but you know, there are some differences and many similarities. Yeah, but these are complex organisations. I mean, North Tyneside had 8,500 employees. So you know, the chief exec was a chief exec of a huge public organisation. When I got to Durham, I think we had over 20,000 employees. These are really big jobs and huge, complicated services. So I think the council provided something like 754 different services to the public. Some that you know about, but some that you don't, and just take for granted. And so I think it's very easy to knock public sector, and very easy to say that if I was given a chance, I would do something better. But it's difficult.
There's so many different moving parts.
Yes, and these moving parts affect people's lives. So in Durham, for example, I think they were paying 49,000 housing benefit claims a week. You know, so 49,000 families relied upon the council to get their money. You know, you think about all the looked after children, all the schooling, etc. These fundamentally provide services that for the core of people's lives, and you know, and that's great, because I really did felt like I was giving something back. Then I was actually involved with helping people to improve their lives. Sounds cliched, but there you go.
What sort of role do you think technology plays within that sort of environment? Because as you say, there's lots of moving parts. It affects people's lives, all of the employees, all the different services. How do you think technology has a role in that, in improving that setup?
Okay, so that's a big question, a small question for a very huge.
I know, how long we got?
So I think I'll just choose to ignore that one, but there you go. So I think there's a number of layers. And the first one, I think, is accuracy, quality. You know, by using technology, you can have consistent access to consistent data, access to quality data. And that's vital when you're paying people and that kind of thing. So having sort of relational databases and internationally recognized systems sitting on top of that, it provides that quality and that consistency. You get the same message out every time. Yeah? So that's kind of the base level. And then I think more importantly, it allows distributed services. So using technology, it's much easier to provide services across the borough. You can imagine in Durham, you have to provide services up in Tees Valley, and also in Seaham, to very, very different places. So some urban, some post-urban, some ex-mining communities, some very rural communities, and having technology and using that wisely can allow those services to be distributed better and accessed better. And that, I think that access leads on to the third thing, which is it allows people to access and make use of the services, self-serve those services themselves, releasing effort, creating enough headspace, I think, for people to focus on what's really important for the customers. Yeah, so some clients, customers, consumers of council services demand a huge amount of resource. Looked after children, for example, a disproportionate amount of resource. And yet it's people like myself who get the bins picked up, and we use very little resource, direct resource. And so using technology allows us to get that balance right, I think.
Awesome. So then you left the public sector.
I did.
And then what was next?
Well, I got the opportunity to retire at the ripe old age of 57, a bit earlier than I thought of, but I thought, why not? And go and try doing something myself. So we mentioned Mike Coburn earlier on in the interview, and Mike had been doing some doing some mentoring and coaching for me. So he was somebody I turned to when I left. When I was going through that process, Mike and I were talking, and I decided that I would set up my own business. The first book I wrote was called Guerrilla Worker, and that was the title that I took for my business. It's a concept of, when we think about guerrilla warfare, you think of small bands of soldiers with popular support coming out of the woods, getting on with whatever they're doing, then disappearing back into the undergrowth. And my thinking about work of the future is very much that way, that it's about bringing the right people together, getting on with a task, popular support, getting back out and regrouping around the next threat or opportunity. And so I set up my business. I left Durham, and I was driving home, and somebody rang me up and asked me if I'd like to do some work. And right up until the pandemic and the lockdown, I've had a fantastic run of it. And but there you go.
Okay. And so what's the type of projects that you do or you used to do?
Well, what I started out with was, I'll do that. I was a Yosser Hughes, just because I could do that. Yeah, anything that would come my way. But what I really like to do is help companies to think about their purpose, how what they're trying to do, and how technology is involved in this. So people come to me and say, our IT is rubbish, or words to that effect. It's usually something ruder. And I say, okay, tell me then, what's the purpose of your organization? And that's a question that flummoxes nearly everybody. Yeah. And so I say, well, okay, if you can't explain to me, if you can't articulate what the purpose of your organization, then any IT is going to do, isn't it? Any IT will deliver what you don't know you want. So you've got to start with, okay, what is it that we as an organization are trying to do? What do I need? What components do I need to deliver that? Yeah. Okay. So what technology would underpin those components? What have I got? What haven't I got? What's rubbish? What needs to improve? Yeah. And you tend to find that most companies have already what they need. They just don't know the power of the technology that they have. They haven't applied it properly. They haven't trained in it. Yeah, it lacks the vision of somebody senior in the organization saying, this is the journey we're on. We brought this tool in to do this. And I could do with you being trained up on this. You need to understand how it works, because that's how we're going to drive this business forward. That's the bit that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, so it's still being that person who translates between the IT folk and the more strategic business plan.
Yes, I think helping people to think about that strategic plan, or the interrelationship between technology and that strategic plan. Yeah, all technology is rubbish if you don't know how to use it.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
All words to that effect.
We're going back to problem in share, not in computer again, aren't we?
But you do get that ethos of the technical team blames senior management blames this technical team. Yeah, and the truth is that until both of them understand what they're there for, then neither side's going to achieve their objectives. And quite often I end up sitting down with the IT team and for the first time explain to them what the purpose of this business is and where they fit in it. And some simple things like they don't know the turnover, they don't know who the customers are, they're sort of blindly trying to deliver services against an unknown objective. It's not rocket science, but then nobody's rocket science is rocket science. Everybody is a specialist in something, and it looks very easy to you when you're doing that. And then what other people do is very complicated to you, and that's what I think makes so fascinating with people. And it goes back to getting the right people in to do that, getting the right people in to do the right job.
No, it sounds fairly simple, but everybody's so busy doing what they think they should be doing, but nobody's taking that time to stop and reflect and say, hang on a second, why are we doing it this way? It doesn't make any sense. It just causes problems downstream or upstream, and let's all get together and actually figure out how to make this a lot simpler. And
we do it this way because we've always done it this way.
It drives me insane.
But it keeps people like me in employment.
Oh, me too. It's like, why are you doing it that way? Yeah, but why? Asking the 5 whys. It's just,
yes, indeed.
Being that annoying 5-year-old.
I suppose where I focus is the first why is, why are you in business? And if you can't articulate that, then you might as well give up. Why can you expect anybody else to understand what you're trying to do if you can't articulate what it is your purpose is?
No, definitely. What else do we need to talk about, Phil?
Well, that's a difficult question. I think I've covered. I touched about the agenda that we followed at Dome: the freedom from hierarchy, freedom from location, freedom from dogma. I mentioned the dogma bit, but what we did was we allowed people to go and work wherever they felt was appropriate, and so we had staff embedded in customer premises. And my management team said, you can't do that. They'll ask for things, and you think, well, isn't that what customers do? Isn't that what? Can't we then provide a better service for them and stop wasting our time on things that they don't want? So that was the location. So I was of the view that we do 3 kinds of work. You do stuff with the customer, so go and sit with the customer. You do stuff with the team, so sit with the team, and you do stuff that you can do anywhere. So go and do that anywhere, on the beach, in the pub, whatever you want. Just go and do it, and trust people to be working. And the second one was terms of hierarchy. Go and get involved with the people who you need to do that job. Forget about where they are in the structure. If this person who happens to be the director is the best person to do, go and speak to them about it. And forget about the titles and get the right. So that location, hierarchy, dogma, I think it's a great way of thinking about the future of work. It's about being in the right place, using the right people, and stick to the rules that matter.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And organizations almost have to get with this kind of program nowadays. We're tackling very weird times, and we have been absolutely appalled at the way some employees have been treated.
Indeed.
Throughout this, and that talked about that controlling structure. And people expected to be on Zoom all day long so the managers can check they're working, and there's been some horror stories actually.
Indeed, I mean, you've seen those tools for monitoring, so you can see whether your employees are working, but you don't know they're working just because you can see them. I knew a bloke who very early on in my days who he wasn't an employee of mine, but you'd pick the phone up and pretend he was on the phone all day, but he could see that the light wasn't on, so he actually wasn't on a call of anybody. But people are doing anything to look like they're at work.
Yeah.
Do you need to turn that on its head and say, look, I'm trusting you to do this job. If you don't do that job, then that trust is broken, and I'm afraid we'll have to depart. You're not the person from our organization. But remember, this agenda that I followed was in the public sector. It couldn't be done in the public sector. You've got to follow the rules. It's not true. You can do anything you want as long as it's the right thing for that organization.
During lockdown, we started a company as well, Work Pirates. So it sounds very similar, the ethos to you, the guerrilla working stuff. So I have to definitely pick the book up and have a read.
Well, I've had 2 books. So
what's the other one?
So the first one was Guerrilla Worker, and then the second was Paradigms Lost. And so it's
funny. I just got it.
Hey, it's a cracker. I'm available all week. So in that book, I dismantled the myth of business as management as control, and all the ways that we control or try to control people within their business. But I've asked the question of hundreds of people of why they come into work, and money's usually the last thing that they say. So they say things like, I'd like to be a part of the team. I want to do interesting stuff. Yeah, I like the challenge. I like the difference. But everybody says, I want to make a difference. Nobody says, I come in to be controlled.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating thing. Yeah.
No, there was a line, absolutely fabulous. Do you remember that program? And I think Jennifer Saunders' character turns around to her sort of PA. It's like, Bubbles, what do you do? And she's like, I don't know, get paid. So it's just one of my favourites. It's like, hasn't got a clue. She's just wandering around getting paid. It's brilliant. So yeah, not that.
No, not that. Absolutely. Something like that.
Awesome.
But there are people who just want to go to work to be paid. There are people who want to be given A and B to do and just get on and do it, and that's fine. So put those in those A and B jobs, and they're happier. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, so we could talk to you about the future of work forever, but sadly we have to move on to the quick fire round. So James is going to ask you the first question.
Question number 1: where is the strangest place you've ever been?
Recently, I think, has been on the roof of Alnwick Castle.
Oh wow!
So yeah, absolutely wow. And so there's lots of stuff behind Alnwick Castle that you don't see. So stuff that goes under the ground, and tunnels to keep the plebeian hordes away from the upper echelons of society. But I got an opportunity to go and have a look at the roof, and that was really good. And I could, if you gave me half an hour, I could think of hundreds of other places, but it's just it was just that most recent, I think, strange place that I've been.
No,
didn't involve a broomstick.
No.
Not from Harry Potter.
Yeah, how do you think I got there? Come on.
Yeah, obviously. I took Oliver years ago to broomstick training at Alnwick Castle, and I sent my dad a picture, and he was like, so my dad worked in Kent Police in an office of intelligence analysts, right? And between them, none of them could figure out how we took the photo. Like, was the string involved? Like, dude, he jumped. We took the photo. It took us like...
People say, yeah, but how are they getting to fly? They jumped.
It was really funny. So yes, that was one of my favourite stories about my dad. Okay, so I know we talked a little bit about cybersecurity, so this is a bit of a naughty question. But if you could hack into any computer, which one would you choose?
I think it would be one of the political parties to, naming no names, no patriot, but to highlight the inequalities within society that they are producing blatantly, the lies and mistruths that they tell. Perhaps a bit of amending their scripts behind the scenes.
Yes.
You could change speeches.
Yeah,
exactly. That'd be brilliant. We weren't expecting that from Boris or Keir this week. That's a change of direction.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Free
donuts for every household.
Well, that's very Trumpian. Yeah. Free donuts with my name iced on and right.
Yes.
Right on the icing.
Orange donuts, yes, lovely. Cool.
And then this question kind of links back to what you did at university. What's the most ridiculous animal on the planet?
Well, that's a strange question because there is no such thing as a ridiculous animal. All animals have evolved to fit the circumstances that they find. But I suppose the strangest looking one must be the duck-billed platypus, and it's an animal that shouldn't exist, And many people actually, when the first species came back from Australia or New Zealand, I forget where now, and went to London, and people thought it was just made up. They'd stuck a beak on a beaver or something, and so it's an animal that doesn't look right. But they talk about higher animals, more evolved animals, but any animal that's today is just as evolved as any other. They're just evolved for a different set of circumstances.
Yeah, I love all the Australian ones. I think they're just mint. Just all of them don't exist anywhere else.
Well, there was a huge array of animals, much larger mammals in Australia, right up until time 40,000 years ago when men arrived. And so mankind just eventually does away with all larger mammals that are any threat to them. except the ones they herd. Most dangerous animal in the world on the planet is man.
It's humans. Yeah. They're probably the most ridiculous as well then, aren't they?
Well, we are. We have to cover up and everything because we're just...
Awesome. Okay, and then the question we ask all of our guests is, if we could get the DeLorean and pull up outside your house, obviously masks and, you know, it's all sterilized, etc., and we could take you back to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give to you?
When I ended up Durham County Council, not North Tyneside Council, we had some an opportunity for some mentoring and worked with something to help us to understand what we were good at and what we enjoyed and what we didn't. And I think if I went back to my 18-year-old self, I would encourage myself more to learn about who I was, what things I actually enjoyed, what I didn't, what things I thought I was good at, what I wasn't, usually the same thing, and go down that route. Be yourself. I'd actually like to have done more artistic things. I went down science, but I think I would like to have done more artistic things. And, perhaps paint, perhaps be a musician. I don't think I'd ever be good at them, but so that's my advice. Know who you are. Physician, heal thyself, as they say.
Yeah, it's difficult. There's so many big decisions you have to make at that young age, and you know, it takes down a path. But I love the fact that you have sort of tried some different things and figured out along the way, trial and error, what were you good at, and you know, you're managing to do it now.
Well, that was a complete turnaround for me after this training or personal development. I realised that, look, stop trying to do things which I'm not good at. Get other people to do those. Stick at what I am actually good at. Yeah, so there you go.
One of my favourite things is, what can we delegate, automate, or eliminate?
Absolutely. So when we're going to buy a new system, the first question is, do we need it? The second question was, do we have one? because you've usually got one that does it anyway, and then the third one is, okay, can we buy one? Yeah. And it's the same sort of thing, but the first thing is stop doing it. Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm sorry, I'm going to go on now, but when I was at Spices, one of the things that I used to be sitting in my office going through the reports and looking at sales, I think, and somebody would knock on the door and say, can I just ask you that? And I say, okay, yeah, get on with the reports, and I knock at the door. And then I thought, so I said to them, well, what would you do? And say, well, I'd do this. Well, that's what I would do. And so they came back to, well, what would you do? Oh, that's what I would do too. And then eventually they stopped coming. And at that point, I realized that what I was doing on my desk wasn't work. The work was actually engage with the people. This was just admin. Yeah. And so since then, I've tried to get rid of that, as much admin as possible, and focus as much time I can engaging with people, either customers or staff. Yeah.
And it is interesting that people generally tend to know what the answer is, but they almost need that. Is this right?
Well, it's that controlling environment, you see. In your controlled environment, you have to seek authority to get this done. In a trusting environment, I trust you to go and make a decision. And if you get it wrong, we'll have a chat about it. And you'll learn that way. Yeah. I learned to walk by falling over, not by somebody telling me how to do it.
No, so true. It's so true.
So for our listeners, if you want to find out more about Phil and all the good things he gets up to in his books, of course, best place to find him is guerrillaworking.com, 2 R's, 2 L's, guerrillaworking.com. We've really enjoyed chatting with you today, Phil.
We have. You talk all day.
Fascinating.
I'm quite good at it.
So are we. So thank you ever so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode, when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.